Aloha mai kako, everybody. My name is Naomi Blue Summers. I'm the operations coordinator for the Wahiawa Value Added Product Development Center. Joined tonight with Professor Faustino Dagdag. This is the fifth session in 12 session long Lean Launch series that DAG is leading. All of these sessions are recorded, so if you missed any of the previous ones, they're available on the Leeward Community College YouTube channel. And to get informed of when the next sessions are coming up, please subscribe to our newsletter. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dag.
Oh, Kara, everybody. I really appreciate you sharing your time with me this afternoon. And I know there's a lot of things you should be doing and can be doing, but I do appreciate that you decide to invest your time with us this evening. And so today we're talking about, lean launch methodology. And the idea behind the lean launch methodology is to increase the viability of startups to continue on to become very successful, scaling and becoming a large corporation one day, hopefully for most of the people who start a business. That's one of the end goal dreams, is to be one of the biggest corporations in the world. And some of them will probably make it. But this evening, we're talking about an area that I am not an expert in, but I'm going to provide some high level look at branding. So many times when I work with startups, especially startups who have great dreams of building a successful business, and they look at their brand and they sometimes misunderstand what a brand should be, what a brand should function as, and what brand should actually contribute in terms of the connection with their market. So as we were planning the lead launch session, we decided to provide this evening with a high level look at developing brands. Again, I am not an expert in it. In fact, one of the attendees tonight is an expert in branding, so uh, we might refer to him in a little while. But anyway, let's get started because I know your time is important. So I'm going to pop up my slides, and we're going to be looking at some slides, have some discussion, and looking at some videos. So let's get started. Let me get this up again. So again, this is a lean launch series and customer-centric brand development. So I want you to look at these brands, yes, and really think about. Let me move this. Oh, so let me do this way. I want you all to look at these 15 brands and sort of in your mind select one or maybe two that is really something that resonates with you. So I'm going to give you maybe about 40 seconds or so to just scan through this. All right, so which one of those brands gave you the most positive feeling? Anyone want to sort of contribute which brand? Let me put that brand up back. These are brands again. Anyone have an idea? Want to sort of share which brand gave you the most positive feeling? No. Let me ask another question. When you looked at these brands, you had a feeling, whether it's positive or negative. Am I sort of correct on that? Yeah, kind of, sort of. And so, what this evening is about is to try and look and try to understand when you see brands, not just this 15, it does cause an emotional reaction. And we want to understand that in the world of brands, the stronger the connection, the more successful is the brand. Let me show you the next picture and really want to see what you think about this one. Where's my? What do you think about this one? What kind of emotions does that pop up? Anyone want to share? How many, so who doesn't know the brand logo on the left side? That's Alaska Airlines. So Alaska acquired the Hawaiian Airlines. So when I show this picture, a lot of times looking at just the tail branding, some people like the idea of the taker. Some people didn't like the idea. Some people didn't know what that face was. Some people actually didn't know what the face of the lady with the hibiscus was. But the whole idea of this evening is to try to understand, really try to understand branding in such a way that a successful brand is like an old friend you can trust, feel emotionally connected to, and know they will always have your best interests in heart. And that's the essence of a brand. It becomes an old friend of you. And what we're going to be looking at is some areas in which maybe if you're deciding to create a brand or deciding to rebrand, that this evening might help you in trying to develop these brands that are resonate. So one of the things you can ask yourself, can you build a brand that resonates like those major global brands? And I think the answer for all of you is yes, you can. Just because those 15 brands I showed you, 17 with the Alaska and Hawaiian, they all resonate, but it took a long time to get that emotion up. And when you're a startup or you're trying to rebrand a product or a company, you have to sort of understand, well, what do I want when I create my brand? And to help you, we're looking at the very fundamentals of brand development. And that's with starting with what they call the brand pillars. So the brand pillars are the principles of which you're going to build your brand. And these pillars answer these questions. Why does your company, let me shrink this again so you all can see the entire screen. Why does your company exist? What does it stand for? It's the very first part of branding. The next one is how do your customers perceive you in terms of your competition? Are you blending in with your competition? Are you standing out with your competition? And what makes you unique? The brand will also communicate how distinctive and how memorable the ways that you communicate with your customers. And the last thing it does is how could customers have an authentic brand experience? In today's world, brand and experience goes hand in hand. So there are 5 pillars that we'll be talking about. And so the first one is purpose. Next is positioning. Third is personality. Fourth is perception. And fifth is promotion. So these are the pillars. Stop for a while. Any questions before I go into each of the pillars? Any questions about branding, what we think about branding? It's all about this emotional connection, how to create this emotional connection so that you and the brand are almost like good old friends. No questions? All right, let's go on to the first one. Let's go on to the first pillar. Let me share my screen again. So these Zoom things are always in the way. So the first one, pillar one, purpose. The core reason why your company exists is mission, vision, and value. And this is what drives your company to do what it does. And this is the very first pillar. And I think it's one of, in fact, the most important of the pillars because it answers the question, has to do with your mission statement, your value statement, and the story of your brand. So let's take a look at first the mission statement. A mission statement is a declaration of an organization's purpose. Now, why do you exist? Why does the company exist? And when we look at it, it describes the goal of the company, the promise it makes to its customer. It also provides direction and focus to employees. So the mission statement, oftentimes, when we have startups, and I've run into some startups that doesn't have a mission statement. And if you're going to start a company, you need to have the idea, a real firm idea. Why am I starting this company? What problem am I solving? And so these mission statements play into the very heart of brand formation. So let's take a look at some of the world's famous, I showed you famous logos. So let's look at some famous mission statements and see how those statements connect to what you know about those companies. So let's go back and share. So these are mission statements. So Google is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. You look at Costco, one of my favorite, to continually provide members with quality goods and services at the lowest possible price. McDonald's, to be our customers' favorite place and way to eat and drink. The Disney is very clear. Disney's mission statement is very clear: to entertain, inform, inspire people around the world through the power of storytelling. And Amazon is really, really focused to be Earth's most customer-centric company, to build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they want to do. If you look at those, and if you look and sort of reflect on each of the companies and what you feel those companies are achieving, don't you see a huge connection between that mission statement and what they're actually doing? And so that's when you're looking at the form your brand or rebrand. That's the first thing you would really like to do, is to lay it out so that people can understand what your brand stands for, why you exist, why am I asking you to buy my product, why am I asking my employees to do or produce or do services, because it's important that they understand the purpose. And so that is reflective in the brand. And so again, you go back to the brand Google and you look at the mission statement, it's almost an exact match of what they state and what they do. The other one we're going to take a look at is called value statements. Go back and share. So value statement, value brand, these Zoom things, they always going to be, are the guiding principles that define the foundations of a company's identity, culture, and reputation. Again, it defines the foundation of a company's identity, culture, and reputation. Oops, I went the wrong way, sorry. So it differentiates a company from competitors. It creates you a separation between you and your competitors. It also provides something that's really important, a reason beyond the price, the quality, and the service standards to choose. It creates something that is so special that people want to gravitate to that brand over and over again. It's not just the price, it's not just the quality. It's something that they feel I want to support, I want to contribute. It also shapes how consumers perceive a brand. As they perceive a brand to be more positive, it increases their trust and loyalty. And so what happens is that the values transforms into actions, which transforms into products and services, but it also transforms into experiences, which builds increased trust and loyalty. The last thing it does, it provides a framework for making decisions. So those brand values are very important in terms of how you're going to form the culture of the organization. So let's take a look at the same companies. What's their values? Google's value statement: committed to significantly improving the lives of as many people as possible. This is innovation, quality, storytelling, and diversity. Amazon, customer obsession rather than. I like this. I really like it because it speaks directly to what they want to do. Customer obsession rather than competitive focus. Passion for invention, commitment to operational excellence, and long-term thinking. Costco, doing the right thing. I mean, that is so blunt and to the forehead. Just do the right thing. And McDonald's, their mission and core mission: put the planet and communities we serve at the forefront of every decision, from sustainability to educational program. So these are the values they work on. And this is something that's important to understand. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. That's a quote from Simon Sinek. You might not have heard of him. If you haven't heard of him, he is a quite well-known speaker on management and marketing and entrepreneurship. But here's a statistic that probably mean more to you than Simon Sinek. It's just statistic. 71% of customers would buy from a purpose-driven company. 71% of customers would buy from a purpose-driven company. And so what that means is that if your customers, through your brand, through your product, through your services, can understand has a purpose greater and above what that product or service is, then they're more likely to gravitate towards your product, your company, as well as your services. The one thing that a lot of startups that I run across at the early stages, and one of the questions I ask them often is, what's your story? And the important part of the story, I'm going to show you a video about the power of storytelling. But if you don't have one right now, I want you to watch this video. It's a short video, it's about 3 minutes. And it really gives you the importance of why you should have a story develop around your brand. So let me get into the video. Getting to videos is a two-step process in Zoom. So it's always a tricky process. So let me try and get you without getting too much. So let me share. Oh. Oh. There you go.
Oh, you almost had it, Dag.
Oh, sorry.
You got this.
We're always telling stories. We always have. From cave paint.
Okay, there you go. Can you all see this?
This is I Am. I Am is a good storyteller. No, scratch that. I Am is a great storyteller. We're always telling stories. We always have. From cave paintings to that jaunty new hat we're sporting, everything tells a story. I Am understands the importance of storytelling. Telling a good story gives you power over your audience. Stories engage people to help communicate ideas. You can see how this would be handy in the workplace. Telling a good story creates a bond between the storyteller and the listener. And when that connection is made, the brain of the listener releases oxytocin. The love hormone tells us that we can trust the storyteller and a relationship can form. And you wouldn't do business with someone you can't trust, right? The founder of a successful business will always have a good story to tell. Building a business through blood, sweat, tears, and sacrifice gives their story authenticity. And because they believe in it, you will too. You're telling your own story right now. It's not just those carefully chosen words. Subconsciously, you're giving off signals. Your body posture, the clothes that you're wearing. Stories don't have to be complex or detailed to be interesting. The simpler a story is, the more likely it is to stick. You can maximize your storytelling power by remembering this simple little acronym. S. Solve a problem. Use your story to answer a question that your audience has been thinking. T. Triumph. Whatever happens in your story, an eventual triumph will capture the hearts of your audience. O. Outcome. Consider what you want the end game of your story is. Alt line. Consider what you want the end game of your story to be. What are you trying to achieve by telling it? R. Research. With the correct research, you can tailor a narrative to be specific to your audience. Y. U. Using your own stories wherever possible makes a story more believable. Believing in your story goes a long way to convincing your audience of your sincerity. Make your stories engaging and build a relationship with your audience. If you do that, you'll soon be working on a sequel. The end.
So, back there. So one of the things you want to do is you want to have a story and tell that story, not in person, but wherever you have collateral that you are going to produce. Try and, as much as possible, to put your story in front of them. So the question I have you to answer is, what is the story of your brand? And that's one of the things that a lot of startups don't have, is they don't have a story. But every one of you has a story, and your customers should know about it. And it makes you, the real secret behind brands is that they make you feel like you know somebody. And a story makes the customers feel like they know you, or they know the brand, that they're really good friends with it. So write a story, make sure it's not a long one, but it's one that's believable and something that people can relate to. So any questions about that first one, purpose? Yeah. All right, let's move on to the second one. So the second one is position. So brand positioning just puts you apart from your competition, but it also carves out in the minds of your customers. It's going to carve up a very special place in the minds of your customers. And so that's how they're going to remember you. No matter what happens, it could be a day or two, a month or two, a year or two, but they have your brand in their minds because you have put yourself in a position for them to really remember you. And to do that, what we do is we do a SWOT analysis. I'm going to stay a long time on it, but I'm going to cover it real briefly. We do a SWOT analysis to have an idea how are you going to compete and where you're going to compete with your competitors. The other thing that happens a lot is every business exists to solve a problem, yet in the way they communicate their brand, they don't mention the problem that they're solving. And also, they don't really mention why they're better than their competitors. Last thing is to choose your competitors. This is something that's interesting. Sometimes when you find, I'm trying to move this bar, sorry. So what happens is that a lot of times when you do a startup or you try to compete with everyone in the marketplace. And that usually is not a good idea. And so you have to be able to position yourself by choosing who your competitors are going to be. And lastly, you have to create a brand positioning statement. So I'm going to briefly show you a video on a SWOT analysis. And this is something that is really important to do when you're trying to position yourself. So let me pop up that video all about SWOT analysis. It's a brief overview of what it do, and we'll talk about it after the video. This is us.
For an organization. SWOT stands for a SWOT analysis is a framework used by financial analysts, entrepreneurs, and management consultants to help understand the internal and external forces that may create opportunities or risks for an organization. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, with strengths and weaknesses being internal factors and opportunities and threats being external. Strengths are characteristics of an organization that give it a relative advantage over its competition. Things like a strong brand, an embedded network effect, or best-in-class turnover ratios, meaning greater efficiency than its peers. Weaknesses are characteristics that put an organization at a relative disadvantage. Examples include low or maybe declining margins, an inexperienced management team, or high customer concentration. The opportunities section of the analysis should identify external factors that may offer growth prospects for or improvements within the organization. Because opportunities and threats emerge from the external business environment, it's common to first conduct other types of analysis, like the Pastel framework or Porter's 5 forces. Examples of opportunities include technological innovations that are improving productivity in the sector, changes in social norms that might serve as tailwinds, and low or decreasing supplier bargaining power. Threats are forces in the external environment that represent significant risks to the business or its operations. Threats may include disruptive technological advancements, changing social norms that make a product less attractive, or perhaps it's an industry in decline more broadly. Findings from a SWOT analysis are used to help inform and modify model assumptions, to support credit analysis, to help formulate growth strategies, and even to help identify acquisition opportunities.
So that's really high. Oh, it's still alive. Oh. So that was a super, I guess to introduce you to the concept, but you need to be able to do that. So again, the idea is you have to find the spot in which you're going to compete and position yourself. And by looking at your surroundings and looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you can start to pick where you want to be, where you want to compete. I'm going to pop up the traditional diagram of that and speak about what you can do in creating your own SWOT analysis of this. Typically, this is the four square diagram. We have strengths and weaknesses. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to your company, but it's also controllable factors. Because it's internal, you get to control what happens in terms of increasing your strength or defending your weaknesses, but you have full control. On the opposite side is opportunities and threats, which are external. And since they're external, you don't have control. It's uncontrollable. So you want to sort of understand, what am I good at? What is my company good at? What's my product good at? What is it weak at? And because of these strengths, what opportunities are in front of me? And because of these weaknesses, move that backwards, gone away. Because of weakness, what kind of threats do I face? And by looking at this, you can start to really pinpoint, where should I be placing myself in terms of the competitors, but also in terms of the place of my customers. So as an example, we all know that the tariffs is prevalent in conversations, but if you did a SWOT using the tariffs as a starting point, and you did that examination, you'd find that you would discover that you had opportunities based on certain strengths. And based on that little analysis, you can start to place yourself in a position in which you start to communicate to your customers what my strengths are, what my benefits are, but also you start to build your brand, because in times of uncertainty, what do people gravitate to? In times of uncertainty, what do people gravitate to? Somebody they can trust. So let me ask you all a question. Because of all this noise about the tariffs and uncertainty, how many of you have gone out, and this is typical of what's happening, people have gone out and bought extra stuff, right? How many have heard that? They went out and went out to Costco, they went to Walmart, bought extra stuff. What stuff did they buy in terms of brand? It was interesting to discover that they bought brands that they trusted and didn't buy it based on price. Because in times of uncertainty, you gravitate to something that you can feel comfortable with. And so this is, again, the power of the brand. So if you did the SWOT analysis, you find the spots, you find the spots in which your brand can fit in. And as you fit in, you're carving out in the minds of your primary customers, this is the one I want to go to because I trust them. I feel great. So again, you have to try to figure that out for yourself. And one of the things that's interesting is that over the years I've been helping people do spots. They often find things that are so interesting that they never thought about. if they did not do the SWOT. So I want you to try and do a quick SWOT when you have, when you're thinking about looking at branding. Let's go back to the slides real fast. So these are ways you can position your product or your brand. Its unique features, what's unusual, pricing and quality. Is it easy to application? Is it easy? Is it much better than some competition? What's it made of? What's the product composition? What's the product class? What's my competitors against? And what emotion does it involve? Again, we just went over that example where people were buying extra stuff because of the uncertainty of the tariffs, but they bought brands that they trusted over a price that they thought was cheaper. The next thing is that you have to choose who you're going to compete against. Because if you do the SWOT analysis and you discover that I can most likely be in this spot, I'm going to choose this particular area to compete, you have to look at your two closest competitors. One of the, personally, I think one of the largest errors that startups make or rebranders make is that they try to compete against too many people. And when you try to compete against too many people, you end up watering down what your brand is like because you're trying to, attack too many places. So what you should be doing is to look at the competitors, one up, one down, the two closest, and see how you can concentrate your messaging so that your brand stands out instead of trying to compete against too many of your competitors. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this thing called a brand positioning statement. In this, again, I'm going to refer back to the video. Some of you who've been coming to the sessions will probably see this video for the third time. But it's so important because in a brand, it features the benefits of the product or the services, the value that product brings or services bring, and the experience that it brings. And that's called a brand promise. This is what this product or this service is going to provide you when you acquire it and buy it. But you have to be able to identify your target customers because you want to have the message be very direct, emphasize what your brand's unique competitive edges and what makes your brand or your product special. What is something above and above it, and emphasize the benefits and experience you want them to receive every time. And that is done when you write a brand positioning statement. And this is a short video on how to write one. There's a template on it. And when you look at this video, when you acquire this video, you may want to stop it and look at and work on that template. But I often like to show it because positioning is at the heart of going to business. So let's take a look at that video.
A brand positioning statement will help your business to define itself and also appeal to a certain demographic. In today's market, it isn't enough to have a product or service that sells on features and benefits. People are looking for experience and to belong. So that you know what a brand positioning statement is, let's take a look at two examples, one from Nike and one from Starbucks. So here's the one from Nike. For serious athletes, Nike gives you confidence that provides the perfect shoe for every sport. And then Starbucks. To cultured millennials, Starbucks is a premium coffee house that adds an intimate and valuable experience to a consumer's lifestyle by integrating caffeine with a comfortable environment. So as you can see, the brand positioning statement includes a brief description of your target market and then how you want that market to perceive and experience your brand. So how do you go about creating a brand positioning statement? Well, you need to answer these three questions. Number one, who are my customers? Number two, what benefits does my product or service offer to its users? And three, who are my competitors? And what do I mean by question number three? Well, what I'm asking there is, how do your competitors differentiate and position themselves compared to yours? Are they saying they have a better environment? Is it an ease of use? Do they have more expertise, etc.? So once you've answered those three questions, your brand positioning statement should describe succinctly what core benefit your product or service offers compared to that of your competitors. Here's a template that you can use to create your own statement. And what you need to do is you need to fill in the blanks from the answers to the questions that we asked ourselves earlier. Let's take the two examples that we spoke about earlier from Nike and Starbucks and drop those into the template. So with Nike, we have for serious athletes, that's the customer group. Nike is the brand, gives confidence, is a differentiating benefit for the customer by providing the perfect shoe for every sport. And that's how they make it possible. Next up, we've got the Starbucks one. Let's drop that in. So we've got to cultured millennials, again, the customer group. Starbucks is your brand. Is a premium coffee house that adds an intimate and valuable experience to a consumer's lifestyle, differentiating benefit. By integrating caffeine with a comfortable environment, how they make it possible. Having a good brand, product or service isn't always about features and benefits. What they're looking for is an experience, a great feeling from using your product or service. And a good way to show people what they will get by using your product or service is by having a great brand positioning statement. One key thing to mention though, is that when you create that positioning statement, everyone, and I mean everyone who is involved in your brand in any way, must live by that statement. It's only through build-up of experiences of hundreds or thousands of people talking to one another, talking about the experience that they've had with your brand, that builds that trust and loyalty. If not everyone is singing along the same lines of your brand positioning statement, then it just will not work for your brand. But hey, we know, don't we, that you're going to write the best positioning statement and everyone involved in your brand is going to sing the song of that statement. So much so that your brand is going to rock.
So that's a positioning statement. Again, I show that often because it's so critical in a startup or even rebranding that you have a clear understanding what your brand stands for. Any questions about where we are or not? Can you sort of detect a theme that's running through? Has to do with experience. Let's get on to number three. Let's share my screen. So one of the things you want to do in this exercise is write down, what are you differentiating? What makes you different from your competition? What makes you different in terms of your product, your services? Also, how do you think your customers value that differential? And try, again, when you get a hold of this video, try and go to that video and try and freeze it and try to use that template to write your own brand positioning statement. Number three, personality. So brands have personality. Brand's voice and tone is how you want to sound to your customers and how you want them to feel when reacting to you. It has to do with authenticity and consistency to build trust. I want you to imagine your brand as a person. It has a personality. Your brand language, design, and color, and going back to brand story and character. So when we look at this third area of personality, you first have to decide which one of my target segments am I going to really address myself. So because you have to create messaging that will speak directly to that one target segment, the one segment that you want to build your brand around. And the reason is that you have to pick their language is because when you speak directly to them, you have to be able to speak their language. And this is one of the things when it comes to marketing, is that if we're not understanding the communications process, we tend to try to get a message in such a way that no one understands. What I'm trying to get is, this is the classic uh, communications diagram. There's a sender, they send a message, they encode the message through a channel, could be written, could be electronics. It's decoded, the receiver then goes ahead and understands it, and then they take action. The weakest part of this is the encoding part. If the message is encoded incorrectly, then what happens is that no action is taken because that decoding never took place. However, if it's encoded, if the messaging matches the receiver, they can clearly understand what is being communicated, and then they'll take action. So this is the reason why when you're creating a brand, you have to be very specific about the language you're going to use towards that target audience so that they can easily decode your message that you're sending and take action in terms of buying a product or becoming brand loyal. So this is important, that because this is all part of the personality. I'm showing you 4 European car brands. And if you're a car buff, you immediately understand that one of these brands is the most expensive and the most powerful car ever built. Even if you are not a fan of cars, by looking at these logos, can you understand which one of these could be the most powerful of the brands? What do you think? It's the one with the bull. So you can see even in a logo, the personality comes through. And a Lamborghini is also one of the most expensive cars you can buy, but it's also one of the most powerful cars that you can purchase. So again, when you're looking at, let me go back to the slides. When you're looking to create your brand or rebrand, even the logo should have a personality. How about this group of people? Can you find and understand the personality of the product or the brand just by looking at their avatars? The Michelin Man, M&M's always funny, Duracell, Pillsbury. So this is again where personality is. When you're building your brand, you have to try to create a persona of what your brand represents as if it was a person. If it's a serious brand, then you should have a serious persona. If it's a fun brand, it should be a fun persona. If it's a critically medical brand, whatever it is, you need to create a persona or a profile or an image of what your brand is, so that when people interact with it, they immediately have this feeling that I can trust them. I am familiar with them. The next pillar is perception. Perception is how customers experience the brand. And so it has to do with the brand experience, brand promise, brand consistency. And what I want to do is that when you're looking at experience, it has to be have an identity to it. The identity eventually needs to be familiar, become friendly. When that occurs, you have trust. And when trust occurs, you have a relationship. So one of the things you really want to do in brand building is to lead up to getting people to understand your identity, becoming more familiar with your identity, building trust on it so you can build a long-term relationship. And so this cognitive was just thinking, let's think about the identity. Affected, I feel like you're a good friend of mine, so I feel like I can trust you. And let's say I'm going to take action by relationship. I'm going to introduce you to one final video, which is kind of on the advanced side, but I want you to understand what the world of branding has evolved to. So this is a little longer video, but it has to do with this thing called a brand experience. So let me show this one final video so that, again, it's advanced thinking, but you can do it. Let me run this video.
What's up? Brand builder Stephen Hurahan here at brandmasteracademy.com, and in this video you're going to learn what brand activation is with top brand examples, so you can understand why modern brands are activating their experiences and get some inspiration to activate yours. Now, if you're new to the channel and you want to build brands that go beyond the visuals using strategy, psychology, and creative thinking, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. If you want to fast track your results, make sure you grab the Pro Brand Strategy Blueprint. It's a free download and the link is in the description. Now, the term brand activation has been growing in popularity over the last few years or so. Now, the first time I came across this term was about 5 or 6 years ago when I was actually doing freelance work for a brand activation agency. And they were working on a ton of really exciting projects. And those projects were all about bringing the brand to life through engaging experiences. So what is brand activation anyway? Well, brand activation is a strategy used by modern brands to bring their brand to life. Now, if you think about how noisy markets are today and how difficult it is to stand out, you have so many different options within any industry and so many different businesses vying for the attention of that market, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to get that attention. So brands are having to think outside the box, and they're having to think of their audience's day-to-day lives, what they do on a day-to-day basis, and come up with creative ways to pull them out of their monotonous routine so that they can get that engagement and they can plant a memory in the mind of their audience. So why is brand activation so important? Well, it's important because today's environment and the way we deal with brands has really changed over the past 10 or 20 years. This digital environment that we find ourselves in has almost become this virtual reality, and a lot of the relationships that we have with brands tend to be virtual, and there is a lack of tangibility to that, and it can get lost. That relationship can get lost. So brand activation is all about bringing that brand to life and bringing a tangibility to that engagement to remind the audience, hey, look, this relationship is real, our brand is real, and we're about more than just this transaction. So let's have a look at a few examples of brand activation. But before we do, don't forget to like and subscribe, and that notification bell will let you know when I release new videos just like this. Now, brand activation comes in many forms, but one of the most impactful and one of the most popular is experiential marketing. Now, experiential marketing is all about providing the audience with a memorable experience that they can take away and recall later on. And experiential marketing tends to form long-term memory structures that consumers and the audience will remember in years to come. Now, there are a few really outstanding examples of this, but none more so than Red Bull with their Stratus campaign. Now, in case you weren't around or you don't remember, Red Bull sent a skydiver up to the edge of the atmosphere and broadcast it live as he jumped out and created a world record for a skydive. And in doing that, they created a lot of scientific data for future pioneers. And because it was broadcast live, you had this huge amount of earned media coverage, and that brand experience really stuck in the minds of the audience as this skydiver jumped from space. So this is a great example of experiential marketing. And as I said, that earned some tremendous media coverage that really amplified this campaign. But of course, not everybody has a multi-million-dollar budget to be able to run experiential campaigns just like that. So let's bring this back down to earth a little bit. Now, another beverage brand, Lipton Iced Tea, they ran an experiential marketing campaign called Rise and Slide. And Quite simply, they put a water slide in the middle of London and they ran a campaign and captured all of that and amplified that across their channels as well. And in doing that, they aligned with this feeling of summer, and that's an association that they really want within the reputation of their brand. Now, although these campaigns were both completely different, they had similarities as well. Both brands were aligning with associations that they want built into the reputation of their brand. They were both providing an out of the ordinary experience for their audience, and they were both leaving long-lasting memories in the mind of their audience as well. And that is what brand activation is all about. So what's the goal of brand activation? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about that engagement and grabbing that attention, but that's only the first step. Once you've done that, the goal is fourfold. The ultimate goal of brand activation is to drive consumer engagement, to drive consumer response or action, to increase brand awareness, and to increase recall and salience. Now, brand activation tend to be one-off campaigns, but if they're executed well enough, they can achieve the holy grail of brand activation, which is earned media coverage. Earned media coverage happens when a brand's marketing activity becomes newsworthy in its own right. Often with the help of PR, the news media picks up on a story of a brand's activity and reports on this activity, amplifying the reach and effectiveness of the overall campaign. Now, we all know that as a brand, you need to stand out. How many articles or videos have you come across giving you tips and tricks of how to stand out in the marketplace? But the reality is, most brands tend to do the same thing. They follow that beaten path. But if you're able to break out of that, if you're able to create a memorable experience for your audience through brand activation and plant a long-lasting memory in the mind of your audience, you might just earn that brand recall and salience and ultimately sell more stuff for your brand. Now, if you
Let's stop that right now. So that seems advanced, but what I want to impress you, even though multi-million, you can actually do it with your company. You have to be creative. It's all about having your customers do something so that they can remember. And companies I ran, we used to run something called the Friday 13th special, which meant that we put a whole bunch of stuff in a package, and we sold it. And it's very similar to the New Year's package thing, but people bought it because two things. They had no idea what was in the package, but what they got it was a big surprise. The other thing, we also said we donate 10% of any proceeds to a charity. And so this is kind of things that you want to do from a creativity side. You want to engage your customers. If you're making pizzas, you might have a pizza lesson, something to have them have hands-on something so that you remember the experience of your brand and your product. So we're heading to the last pillar, and it's not a long pillar. And so let's get to this last one. So people buy with their emotion. This is a classic marketing concept. People buy with their emotions, not their logic. And this is the reason why experience is so big in terms of brand building. When you have a good experience, it triggers positive emotions. So again, what can you create to excite your brand? I'm going to leave that to you, but try very hard to come up with something that will excite your customers and leave a memorable impression. Now let's go to number 5, promotion. How a brand communicates its message and promotes its product or services to cultivate brand loyalty. And it's pretty easy. We look at message channels, message to engage, entice, and motivate customers, brand story, and experience. And there's really one way when you promote. You have to have consistency. Whatever you have come up with in terms of those first 4 pillars, it has to be translated when you actually contact your customers or the marketplace. And so even in the type of communication mix, advertising, consumer sales promotion, trade promotion, direct marketing, social media, professional selling, whatever you are going to engage or touch points with your customers, it has to have a very consistent look, very consistent feel, very consistent experience, very consistent tone of voice. So that, again, if you start to deviate from that, people are going to start to become confused and they may not have the loyalty that they once had. So, again, this is something that's important. Whatever you communicate in terms of the marketing mix, make sure that it has consistency in the messages, consistency in its look, consistency in the colors, consistency in the voice, so that your customers feel like they are with an old friend. And it's becoming more harder and harder because the mediums in which communications take place, the media, is getting so broad. It used to be broadcast, which is radio, television, it could be print, newspapers, magazines, emails, phone calls, text messaging now, instant messaging now, social media, very important. TikTok. It's a huge way to drive the message. Live chats and blogs, another huge way to drive the message. But it also has to be consistent. And this is the last part of Pillar 5. And that is when you promote your product, your brand, there has to be consistency in the messaging. And so there's two ways you got to do a message delivery. You're either going to inform, persuade, or remind your customer. And so that key classic example is what I'm going to inform you because I care about you. I'm going to persuade you because I care about you. And I'm going to remind you about because I care about you. So either if you're reminding, persuading, or reminding, you have to have a consistent message behind it. And that follows the AIDA concept, classic concept in advertising and message driving. First, you need to drive attention, create interest, cause desire, and action. Everything you do in terms of communication has to be driven towards an action area. Have them either commit to an action or else commit to investigating into taking an action. The last part of it is developing your brand. Again, this is high level checklist. Your brand name. Again, this brand name is so important because you want to have a brand name that's memorable, but also has a way to carve itself into the minds of your customer base. Logo and visual identity. Again, pick the colors right, what the images are right, even lettering on right. Have a brand story. Make sure you have a brand story. Also, be sure you understand your messaging and the voice that you are going to use in that messaging. And especially when you're creating your tagline or slogan, make sure you have a positioning statement. And also be very, very concise in terms of what experience do you want your customers to have once they engage with you. So again, as we end, it's about 6:30. I'll pop this up before I speak to you directly one last time. So for all of you, you have a limited one-on-one complimentary consultation with myself on Zoom, in person or in Zoom. And if you want to have a consultation, not just on branding, but other things, you might want to consult with the Waihoa Value Added Product Development Center, and they'll contact me, and then we'll set up a meeting, whether again in Zoom or in person. We'd also love for you to come and visit us at the center and book a tour. And we're every day there's something brand new happening there. I was just there this afternoon, and there's a whole bunch of excitement there. This Saturday we have a market, first ever market at the center, and we have 15 or 20 of our vendors there. So please come by. And lastly, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Is there any final questions or anything? Just